The HP Outdoors Waterfowl podcast is fueled by Eukanuba. If you want to get the most of your dog in your training sessions, you need nutrition that holds nothing back. Eukanuba's new premium performance lineup is built with the nutrients dogs need to help unleash their max potential. That starts with providing energy that matches their efforts, supporting optimal nutrient delivery, and supporting post-exercise recovery. Check out the new Eukanuba premium performance lineup and find your dog's fuel at eukanubasportingdogs.com. You are listening to the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. CGA is the world's most comprehensive online gun dog training resource. They've got over 160 instructional videos that includes everything you need to take your 7-week-old puppy to a finished gun dog. Visit cornerstonegundogacademy.com to sign up for the free preview module and begin your training journey today. Cornerstone Gun Dog Academy, the most advanced gun dog training resource on the web. Soundgear is offering a 35% discount to the HP Outdoors listeners for their instant fit industrial and shooter products. You can head over to soundgearhearing.com and use the promo code HPOWP35 to claim your discount today. Lifetime Decoys' new Flex Float Mallard decoys set the new standard for quality and durability in waterfowl decoys. An EVA foam, open bottom construction combined with patent-pended dual flow swim kill system allows for more movement and less wind, the ability to sit flat on ice and dirt, and virtually indestructible design which can be shot or otherwise punctured and still float. Each decoy weighs only 11 ounces with the self-righting keel weights removed or 19 ounces with the weights installed. Check them out today at lifetimedecoys.com. Lucky Duck, about the only creature they can't deceive is you. Lucky Duck is more than a brand, it's a lifestyle built around the subtle art of critter deception. So while you're focused on the business end of your shotgun or rifle, know that they're completely focused on what matters most, you. So whether you're in a duck blind, dove field, on a predator stand, or chasing turkeys, they're confident that their products will help you succeed. Check out their full lineup at luckyduck.com and keep up with their latest news by following them on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All right, welcome. It's episode 199 of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. We are your on-demand audio source for all things waterfowl and waterfowl hunting. If you are new to our show, head over to hpoutdoors.com. You can find all of our past episodes there, as well as any podcast directory out there, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, all the good ones. You can find our show. You can find us across social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you're a Facebook user, you can head over to our Facebook listeners group, chat with a bunch of like-minded hunters, and probably chat with my co-host, Dan Harushka. Dan, what's up, man?
I will be in there. If you join us, I will talk to you.
You are the most active.
199. So that's it's getting up there, bud.
Indeed it is. And we got a good one this week to have as our 199th. We're joined by Nate and Tom Olsen from the Duck Boat Company. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be on. Yeah.
So we got to talking with you guys. We were actually on our way out to Kansas to hunt with our buddy Ben and Big Kansas Outdoors, and we were doing some stuff to try to entertain us for 18 hours, and we were in a truck and got to talking about coming on, and I thought it was a good idea, and I think this is honestly, I think, a really good time of year to be talking about stuff like this because, you know, you're talking about water, you're talking about, boats that are designed to handle big water and tough conditions. So talking a little bit about how you guys not only design products to handle those, but also how to handle those and how to, on the hunter side, how to do that safely and effectively, and just get some tips and techniques from you guys that for guys that maybe either just getting into it or maybe have been doing it for a while and have struggled with an aspect or something like that we may touch on this show. So I'm super pumped to get you guys on. But before we kind of get into all that stuff, for any of those that are listening that aren't aware of you guys, talk to us a little bit about, who you are as a company, where you're out of, sort of, give us that overview of kind of what you guys got going on there.
You want to do this or you want me to? You do. All right. We are based out of Cape Cod, Massachusetts. My dad, Tom, has been building boats since about 2000 or so, mostly wooden boats. And a few years ago in 2017, we ended up making the real big jump over to the fiberglass stuff. He's done a lot of fiberglass stuff in the past, here and there on different projects, but seemed like a good fit at the time. And there's a lot of New England heritage with these boats, and so it seemed like a good fit. And we've been doing it for a little over 3 years now, and coming into the next build season, and it's been going really well. Looking forward to getting into this next build season.
So when you say build season, what does that mean?
We typically don't build the duck boats during the winter. It's mostly during the spring, summer, and fall.
Is that because you guys just like to hunt, or is it like bad for construction?
Well, a little bit of all of that. It gives us time to be able to get out on the water, but it also some of the chemical processes with the resin curing and everything is slowed down by the cold temperatures. But also he has some bigger boats come in, some old wooden boats, to do some bigger projects in the wintertime. And then we start building the duck boats in the spring to get them ready for the following season.
What kind of lead time is there for people that do order from you guys? How long does it take from start to finish? I guess I should ask, not including other boats that you're doing. I'm interested in it, in the entire process. Seriously.
Well, one of the boats can take anywhere, depending on which one it is, 4 to 8 weeks to build. But usually people order one in the previous fall or in the wintertime, and then they end up taking delivery late summer to early fall.
So you guys offer a pretty good range here, it looks like. It's on your website here. It says that 21 is the biggest boat you guys have. Is that right?
Yeah. The 21 is the biggest one we have right now. It's really designed more towards guides, not so much private hunting, just because there's not many people that do that big of party hunting on a regular basis for something that big.
Right. So, and you guys have down. I know I've always been intrigued by the 14-foot class because, like, kind of like you said, I'm not a guide, and it seems sort of the most, similar to what I could probably handle, like in my, around my house, and kind of that sort of thing. But when you talk about having such a wide range, what do you guys find is the most popular, size that people are looking for?
Right now, it's a 17 C class, and it's funny because I was at this game feed a couple of years ago when we first started doing this, and a guy came up to me and told me, "Oh, I've had 5 of these. I've had 3 17s. I've had a 14 Classic, a 14, and had them forever." And he says, "This is the best one. It's big enough and it's small enough." And I was like, "Wow." That's pretty good. I should use that as a tagline, but it's pretty versatile, 1, 2, 3 people, and it can handle, diver hunting when it's rough or whatever, and people can also go up and put them in the marsh. Some guys are running jack plates on them, and so they don't float in too much water, and yet they're still pretty very seaworthy and pretty comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the specs on this 14 here, and it says it drafts only 6 inches of water and can where does it say here? I just read it. Allows up for 4 hunters. Is that correct? Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
4 hunters in a 14-foot boat is pretty impressive. I certainly.
Is that the 14 C class?
Yeah, C class. Yeah,
that's rated for 4 people. It's really designed around
be a little tight.
Yeah, designed around 2 hunters. You can squeeze 3 here and there if you need. Same with the 17 is designed around 3. You can squeeze 4.
Yeah, it's really two guys and a dog. People 3. You can carry more depending on how your people are, but it's really governed by the opening of the blind, really, too.
So I've had some sketchy times out on little John boats, 14-foot John boats. And our local lake here is on average like 8-9 feet deep, Josh. Like
Something like
not
that, yeah, not very deep.
super deep. So when the wind, like any kind of storm comes through, like those waves just kick up, right? And it gets super scary. So like thinking about going out on big water, and I look at your boats and just see how much they're sitting above the water. I'm like, that looks safe to me. Like I would not have an issue going in a boat like that, right?
No.
So is that, what, I guess we can talk safety a little bit, but I guess, how big of waves do you guys feel comfortable in? How, like, when
That's
you're up there and you want to go hunting the next morning and you see waves are going to be this high, you're like, no way. But
That's a real loaded question. It's so situational. More the period of those waves is way more important than the height of those waves. An 8-foot roller that's got a 20-second period coming off of the ocean is way less dangerous than 2-foot chop with a 3-second period. What you're talking about is that nasty little wind chop. That stuff can beat the brakes off of a lot of people in a lot of boats real quick. Something like that, you can obviously tell if you're going to get blown out of a spot real easy by really high winds, but when it's on the line, right on the edge, it always ends up being one of those calls that you make in the morning. You go down there and it's, hey, that's a little too rough. I think we got to push on back to somewhere else.
And it's less the boat than the dealing with anchoring, the decoys, all the stuff you got to do around it too, is how comfortable is that. It's not so much the safety of the boat, because the boats are kind of like little lifeboats. They're built like, if you look at what's on the back of a cruise ship nowadays, or Captain Phillips there, the thing is like a submarine that floats. And these boats are a little bit like that. They carry the buoyancy all the way out to the side, so they're very stable. Your knees are, right at the edge of the cockpit. You can lock your knees in, put your toes under. A couple of guys can stand on one side, and it doesn't tip over very much, and has a lot of reserve buoyancy out there. And because of the large dome-shaped deck, it has, if you go figure like buoyancy figures, like Coast Guard regulation for flotation, and the absolute buoyancy of the boat is tremendous, because they rate it up at the height of the cockpit opening. And in a John boat, it's a few inches and it's a huge opening. It's only a few inches above the water. Ours are pretty high above the water, and they contain a tremendous volume. So the one downside is that the bows all taper down to give them a low profile, and so if you're not careful, you can put the bow under a bit and take waves up. But if it's choppy, we're generally running with the front 3 curtains up, and you have the 2 side curtains and the bow curtain, so it's like a Dodger. So it throws
if
all
you do
the
take
water.
Spray over the bow or anything, it sheds it really nice and keeps you really dry.
so do you get people from I'll call us inlanders, right? Like, we're not on the coast. Do you get people come up and say, hey, I just bought this 17-footer from you, C-class. I don't care. Like, I'm going out hunting. And do you ever have to like peel people back and be like, you need to learn, like, you need to learn today, right? And just kind of
It seems
inform
like
people.
most of the guys who are interested in our boats have already had the near-death experience and don't want to do it again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know of
Makes
anybody who's like a beginner, inexperienced guy. I don't think we've met any of those yet.
Yeah, just
Mostly it's
diving right
people who
in.
have had, because the boat's been built for a long time. They, everybody's got one. Oh yeah, I've had one. My father had one. My whatever. They've all got a story. They've all hunted with them a lot. The big majority of people have either hunted them or owned them before, and they will give us the oh yeah, that thing saved my life story, or I want to be, oh, I'm never going to sell this boat. I want to be buried in this thing. I'm planning a Viking funeral, and which are all true things I've heard people say. And so they kind of have already had that uncomfortable experience, or the scare the crap out of you experience, and they don't want to do that again.
It only takes once. I'll tell you, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So with your boats only drafting, a couple inches of water, how often are you hearing guys talking about like, hey, I'm taking it off the coast, but I'm also taking it up in tidal marshes and stuff, and in skinny water and all that kind of stuff. Because to me, I feel like that's a versatility that by looking at it, you wouldn't necessarily like say, oh yeah, this could be a marsh boat too.
That's the
But when you
majority.
look at some of those stats, it's like, well, heck yeah, it can be.
Yeah, I'd say a very, very vast majority of the 17-foot boats are people doing both, hunting big water and hunting backwaters. The 14 C classes, it's probably a little heavier towards the marshes, the backwaters, and the 14 classics, it's really more towards the backwaters. I've seen plenty of pictures and done it myself, taking those 14 classics across some bigger water, but you're not really hunting um, in those places just because it's a smaller boat. You're not doing as much.
And
Big.
what's the difference between the classic and the C class?
The beam is the biggest difference. The 14 Classic was the original one that the Clark brothers designed back in the late 80s, and then they revamped it along with Christian, one of their employees, right around 2000. Just make it more seaworthy, made it a little beamier, so it could carry more horsepower, could carry more payload, more people, a lot more room in it. It's taller. It's just a much more seaworthy, bigger boat, while still keeping the same, length overall. But it's, you look at them side by side and they're vastly different boats, even though they're the same length.
It's probably twice the volume,
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Boats grow and shrink in the cube, all three dimensions. So just the length doesn't tell the story.
Yeah, the 14 Classic is one of the best little two-person backwater boats out there, and the 14 C class doesn't do it nearly as well as the Classic does. But then flip over to the big water, and the Classic isn't going to fare nearly as well as the C class.
It's interesting as you're describing this. I'm looking, and to look at the classic as a guy that's never been in one of these boats in person. When I'm looking down to the maximum horsepower, it's only 10 on the 14 Classic, which leads me to that point that by looking at it, I don't know if I'd associate it with marsh, because with the rounded profile and everything, it just screams bigger water to me as an inlander, I guess. But now I see what you're saying with the two differences, and that I guess the horsepower really kind of is one that jumped off of me.
Boating blind, and so it's more about sitting up rather than lying down in a sneak box.
Yeah.
It's more about sitting up and facing out the side or whatever, and having a little more room as well as more seaworthiness. But the reason it has a low horsepower rating is the Coast Guard formula. The first thing you do is multiply the beam. It is the beam at the transom is the biggest factor, and so the boat tapers back pretty skinny, kind of old style. In the stern, so that limits what it is. There's this bit of a formula, and that's why you see bass boats, 18, 19-foot bass boats with a 250 on them, because they're 12 feet long.
Yeah, you got a picture, it looks like, of the two side by side kind of overhead on the website here, and that's pretty clear.
Yeah,
you can see the distinction between the two real clear on that photo. Yeah.
And a lot of guys it's rated for a 10. People have been known to over subscribe on that one.
Yeah.
But
we've heard that guys love running more power on it, but unfortunately that's not what they're rated for. And it is what it is. It's something that the Coast Guard regulations are very, very defined and very explicit on. And so unfortunately it's rated at a 9.9 and makes it a little bit slower. But even with those sort of big water shapes like you were talking about, they really do a great job at hiding in that marsh, just because all those rounded lines, they just fade into the background.
Yeah.
So where do you guys find that you send most of your boats to? Are you a lot of guys on the coast, on the ocean? Are you Great Lakes? Are you just random all over the place?
It's majority East Coast. I'd say then out around the Great Lakes would be the next big area. And then we've sent a couple out to the Pacific Northwest, a couple out to the Great Plains region, Dakotas, stuff like that. But yeah, the East Coast is definitely from the
And
Carolinas north.
are these getting, how do you guys ship them? Do you trailer them places? How's it get from, if I'm sitting in Michigan right now, are you going to pull into my driveway one morning with the boat or what?
Sometimes.
We do offer delivery, but obviously that ends up getting expensive.
Yeah.
But long distances. We work with the client and with third-party shipping service like UShip, and arrange it that way. It is shipping. It is something that ends up being expensive, but it ends up being a drop in the bucket to get something like that out there.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question, I think, I guess before season was out here, end of December, we were pretty much iced up, right? So, I think Erie was probably open. I'm sure, the ocean's open, but you guys probably deal with inland water up there. But how is it with ice? Do you say don't try and break ice? I could see people like on Lake Erie when it starts to get iced up that they would try and barge through it. Is that a no-no in the boats? I know, I was reading about Kevlar reinforcement up front. How does the ice or going through an inch or two affect that?
As far as ice goes, let her eat.
Yeah, it's not a problem.
It's not an issue. Where you really end up getting into issues with being able to break ice is the weight of the boat. A little light, a 14 Classic is not going to be able to break nearly as much as a 17 or a 21. It doesn't have the weight. When you break ice, you're essentially pushing the boat up onto the ice and coming down through. And unless it's real thin skin ice or something, then you're just cutting right through it. And the bigger boats obviously have an easier time, but I personally have broken through probably an inch and a half on the 14 Classic. And I've heard stories of guys from owners with 17s breaking through 2 to 3 inches, no problem. Which that's a lot of ice for a little 17-foot duck boat. I can't imagine you'd ever be able to do that in a John boat. You just push right up on top and just sit there.
Yeah.
It's all situational again, but the boats themselves, no issue.
That's good to know that you can kind of let her rip and not have to worry about ripping the front part of your boat open or something like that. So, that's obviously comforting. And kind of with that, but sort of switching gears a little bit, this time of year, duck seasons are winding down. It's getting cold. People, running their boats a lot. Sometimes, like I live in Virginia. Sometimes we don't get our good pushes of ducks until this time of year. So it's like, you're on them hard and then it's like season ends. What do you guys find are like either, traps that hunters fall into, or just some good tips from the maintenance perspective that you just, hear guys calling, hey, I've had these problems and it's because you guys are forgetting to do these things or whatever. You got any tips for people that are getting ready to wrap up their duck season to, ensure that their boat will be, ready to rock next time they take it out? If they leave it, on the trailer for a month or two or longer or whatever.
I mean, obviously, first and foremost is properly winterizing and taking care of your engine. Obviously, a good scrubbing, good cleaning at the end of the season is always really good, especially for us on the coast. We want to get the salt off of everything, especially all the electronics. You don't want to let that sitting around on stuff. But yeah,
Is there anything that a duck hunter would want to do on their electronics that, like, maybe a guy's like, hey, I got my bass boat, it does its thing, but it doesn't really dawn on them because they're not, they're not thinking about being in cold weather and as much or whatever. Is there anything on that regard that they could do in the boat to help prolong the life of some of that stuff? Like, is there ways to house it differently, or like have protective like coatings or just products out there that can help prolong the life? Because I can 100 years ago, before I had kids, I had a ski boat and I had a ground wire go bad, but it was causing like catastrophic problems. Like literally I'd be going full speed and the boat would just shut off, and then it'd get continuity back and it'd pick right back up. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out what the deal was. And it was because this one ground wire on the ignition switch was going bad, and it caused like a ton of problems. So like, I'm sure there's guys out there that can relate. And I was like, man, if there was something I knew that, could help prolong that or help prevent that, it'd be super helpful. Cause, I was like, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was like, telling my wife we're out there and I'm like, we might be paddling home. I don't really know. It just seems to kind of not want to run sometimes. I don't know.
Yeah, that's two things: heat shrink and dielectric grease. And maintaining those electrical connections and keeping them dry when you can is really important. In freshwater, again, the rinsing the salt off isn't as big of a deal, but he's had more experience with this than I have. He can speak more.
Well, just all the, like you say, grounds are something nobody thinks about. They always think of as the power, is the hot wire attached, and nobody thinks about the ground, and it's equal and oftentimes forgotten. And if connections aren't tight, you think you got it. You can even test for voltage and say, oh yeah, I get the voltage. It's 14.1. This should be fine, but there's no amperage flowing through it, because it's loose.
Yeah.
And, just little things like that. We had a boat delivered. We redid for somebody and put in a new panel for him and sent it 8 hours away or whatever. And he had an intermittent thing, and it was something came loose on the trip down, so, and it's a little tiny thing like that. It's always a challenge with boats. And, for our boats, like the blinds are something that need to be taken care of because they don't get eaten by mice, and so they don't get eaten by mice, and the sun kills them, and they really ought to be kept clean and dry. And if you can hang them up on your wall, because they'll have poles in them, if you can just hang them up.
That goes for any canvas goods though,
that way the mice
decoy
won't live in 'em.
bags and blind bags and stuff like that too. A good cleaning at the end of the year, keeping it dry, keeping it in the shade, keeping it up in an attic, garage, shed, something out of the weather.
Yeah, that's what kills everything. And that's what's so nice. The lids, the hard covers on the boats are great for protecting all that stuff.
I was actually going to ask you about that. Those lids, I think they're awesome for security, obviously, but just kind of keeping it nice and tight. Is there anything you need to worry about if you have that on for like a prolonged period of time? Is there like condensation or moisture buildup that can be problematic, or any ways that you can?
No ventilation, that's for certain.
You can definitely grow some mold if the boat's like getting put away real wet. So at the end of the season, opening it up on some dry days, letting things dry out before locking it down for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I could see that being a common thing. I mean, you've been out all day. The wife's like, "Hey, we got to get to this thing that we got to be at," and you're just like throwing stuff together, and you lock it up, and I'll deal with that later. And later is like a month later, and you're like, "Oh,
it's June."
It's kind of it though, is you can throw all your junk in there, cover it up, and it's covered up for the trip home, and the rain or snow or leaves or whatever. And I wish all boats had those things. But another thing that we have run into over time is some older boats, the front of the locking lid, the fiberglass eventually gives out, and the things can come off and flip up on the highway and take a hike while you're driving down the road. So throw a strap on the front of that, even though it's got a D-ring in the front, so it slips on and then drops down and hooks in the back, so everything's good until 25 years later, and the thing just comes off.
Some of those 30-year-old boats and stuff, I've heard of that happening.
Yeah, we had to.
Luckily, nothing yet with some of the new builds, but some of these boats that are, really old, it's old equipment,
Yeah, and I know I'm going to let you go here, Dan, but I wanted to just say that, like, maintenance is one of those things where, it's like, if it's a pain in the neck to do some of that, like those things. It's like, it's kind of like, oh, I know I should be doing that, but I'm busy, or I got this, whatever. And then if you don't do these things, you neglect those, you know they're going to show their head at 4:30 in the morning at the boat ramp when you're freezing cold or when you're out, you know, and it's going to ruin your hunt. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, the more I feel like there's probably some sort of happy medium routine in there where it's like, you know, you got a routine down where it's like once a month I do these things, every time I do these things, and, you know, try to find that balance or whatever. Otherwise, you know, I think we're all probably guilty of it at some point along the way. You put something off longer than you should have, and then by the time you get to deal with it, it's like, crap, man, if I'd have dealt with this a month ago or whatever, it wouldn't have been near as big of a deal, a headache that I'm having to go through now.
With duck hunting season being as, you know, short as it is compared to, say, a fishing season, it, at least from my experience so far, so many of the headaches and issues that rear their heads during the season, in terms of just the boat, so much of that can be taken care of just by cleaning and organizing and just giving things a rinse down, you know, keeping salt for coastal guys, but keeping things clean and dry and just as in need of condition as you can. And, you know, getting that trailer greased before the season. And, you know, it's not like we're putting 1,500 hours on a boat over the course of a duck season. It's so small in comparison to fishing season or something similar that just really, really basic stuff. And you can get through the entire season scot-free, essentially, you know?
Yeah.
So I have a two-part question for you. One, I feel like we wouldn't be in a pandemic if I didn't ask about the pandemic, and if that has affected you, if that has affected you guys at all, like, you know, getting supplies for builds, and also along with that, just going on with your building schedule, has the changes in the Atlantic flyways, say to the mallard limits, have you seen any shift in people trying to get into these?
Well, not just that, this year the shortened sea duck season probably is something that you know, would also fall into that.
Yeah.
For you
Do you
guys.
see more people looking to do some, you know, sea duck hunts and
And where
more
we are,
in general?
I think it's becoming more popular because the puddle duck hunting is really hard out around here. And the places are getting, every pond has, you know, 100 houses around it, and there's just there's no access. And so I think there seems to be a lot more than, you know, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And you know, layout boats for doing divers, everybody's doing the layout boat now, and so they want to give it a try. A lot of people are trying it out, and you know, they're trying something different. And but I know people are also working harder on the other end of it. I know some of our customers are working a little harder on the other end of it too. We've had to come up with some different blinds for people for doing puddle duck hunting that are a little more
Unique.
you know, conducive to hiding from circling birds overhead as opposed to the ones right over the water, you know. So
Yeah.
people are making you know, changes and accommodations to that for sure. And as far as the pandemic, we're lucky that we're sort of in a hole in the wall. We shut down for, I don't know, a month or something this spring, and luckily everybody came back, and they were all making their extra $600 a week, and I was afraid they weren't going to come back, and they did, and because they were all bored to death at home. And so that was good, but it was very hard getting supplies this summer.
Yeah.
And even like in the middle of the summer, when I'd run out of stuff, I'd be going to West Marine looking for things, and you couldn't get it. And even there, our local West Marine in Hyannis, one time during the middle of the summer, looked like it was going out of business. And I asked them, you know, what is going on here? And they said, well, we can't get anything out of the warehouse in North Carolina because everybody's making $600 a week extra to stay home, and they don't want to come to work. And they don't, you know, you couldn't get trailers and outboard motors. And then E-Tech, they stopped producing E-Tech motors because they shut down in Wisconsin their factory for a while, and decided it wasn't worth ramping back up. So it just, that's gone. And trailers all of a sudden became super hard. So we're trying to tell people who are ordering boats now, look, you got to jump on it, and it's not too soon to, we got to try and buy motors that we might not see until August.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard of that. I mean, that's
Insane.
across a bunch of industries, it's like, it's crazy. And hopefully hopefully after this winter, things will be caught up and we'll be able to get, stuff going. Cause like construction projects and all that stuff is under the same kind of issues. So that's been tough on everybody for sure. You talked about sea duck hunting becoming more popular up there. And I think, I'll call it big water where we live, because big water is relative to where we live. But along the same boats, the puddle duck hunting can be tough. And I live outside of Washington, D.C., so access can be challenging sometimes. So you're seeing more people want to get boats and get on the water. What would you say as far as are some general tips or guidelines? And I'll phase this into two parts. One, for the guy like me, let's say, who gets a 14 C class, how do I maximize my use of space inside that boat when I'm thinking, decoy storage and, the dog and guns and all that, and, chairs to sit on or whatever, like, any tips that you might have on how to maximize storage. And then also, like, for a lot of guys, if I've hunted swamps and marshes and ponds my whole life, I might not be used to setting decoys from a boat in, 15 foot, 20 foot of water. What are some tips that you might be able to offer folks that are kind of, learning that skill or trying to, refine that skill? Because, you can see I've seen people do it on YouTube and they make it look really simple. And then I'm out there and you get a little bit of wind going on and I got stuff everywhere, or heaven forbid you get like skim ice. Oh, just like, where we are at, it's tidal as well. So it'll drag your whole spread out, if at times. So any tips that you can offer on sort of any of that type of stuff?
Well, right out the gate, skin ice, you're on your own. There's no way. It is what it is. If a flow of ice comes through, all you can do is hope to get your decoys back.
Yep, that's it.
But, I guess to attack the second part first, people getting used to setting bigger water spreads and deeper water versus, going from single rigs to long lines and having to deal with all that. Honestly, the best thing to do is just learn how the boat handles, getting familiar with how that boat's going to drift with current and wind and how that boat's going to handle better. I like setting things and recovering things in reverse. It's easier for that boat to weather vane. You have a lot more control over it than trying to chase that bow through the wind. Just learning what works best in terms of handling and maneuverability is the best thing you can do for setting decoys. Because then all you're doing, once you know how to handle that boat, then all you're doing is figuring out where you want to put those decoys, and that's on you. That's on that hunting spot, that's on that river. That's all very situational. I don't know.
Having good anchors, if you're is a thing that you're not used to. If you're hunting in ponds and you're out in the water, is having an anchor scope, which is supposed to be 7-to-1 ideally. So if you're in 10 feet of water, you're supposed to have 70 feet out. So if you're in 30 feet of water, it's 200 feet. You're not, nobody does that, but you need more than you think. A little bit of chain, the right kind of anchor for your bottom. And those are things you want to get used to, because certain anchors will work better in certain conditions than others. And then having a setup so that figuring out a setup so that you can cast off, leave the thing with a black buoy or a decoy or whatever, to, a black fender or decoy, take the loop off, drop it, go recover birds, do your decoys, whatever, come back, pick up your anchor so you can leave it on the ground and not lose it. So you're not doing that all the time. So having proper, long enough lines and a variety of lengths, might be different from what you're used to if you're only hunting in Barnegat Bay all the time and then you want to go out in, outside, or, similar type of circumstance. As far as like the space, the way our boats are set up, you can pack in a lot of decoys, and if you can tag them together on a long line, if you're going out in the water, there's long space underneath the decoy shelves. And if you want, you can go on top of the decoy shelves too and shoot the birds out, and it goes way quicker than out of a bag. And we usually use the upper shelves for stuff, guns, decoy bags, whatever, coffee cups, shells.
Yeah.
They seem to fill up, and then you can have the decoys down under, but you can always put extras up. And if you get into the decoy rafts, there's the ups and the downs of both of those, setting a lot of decoys really quickly. They tend to take up a big space in the cockpit sometimes, so you got to weigh that back and forth as to what you want to do. And organization, if you use coolers for seats, or a bucket as a seat, you can have storage inside. We are liking, as opposed to like a comfy little swivel hunting seat that doesn't have any, might be really comfortable and kind of cool if you have the right one, but it's got no storage in it. And what we're favoring these days are Yeti coolers with a cushion on them. They're super stable and comfortable and heavy, and you can put stuff inside. And if you want to keep things warm, you can keep warm things inside,
That makes sense.
thermos or whatever. And just trying to organize your stuff so that you're getting multiple uses out of the space, and
properly utilizing the space too is something that I've seen with some of our customers, is the bow and stern compartments in these boats end up getting underutilized for what they should be. They're big. The bow compartment especially is really big. Stern one's big too, but then you get the battery and the fuel tank in there, but you still have room on top of there, on top of your fuel tank. You can shove some random stuff in there, maybe a blind bag or something, just to get it out of the way. But that bow compartment, people pitch an anchor in there and some life jackets, but there's so much cubic footage in there. You can shove a whole decoy bag full of stuff in there and get another 12 decoys up there if you want. It's a lot of cubic footage that goes ignored, but that's our boats in particular. As far as, other boats,
it's funny what people come up with. There's everybody's got a different way to skin a cat out there. That's for certain.
Right.
And like one fun thing that we have experimented with, we did for one customer, and then another customer took it to the next level, is putting magnets on to hold your guns. Getting those heavy duty, now they're very available for like sporting clays, carts and things like that. And we made a magnetic gun rack on the front of a console in the 21, and on the first 21 we did, and we're like, wow, that's really great. So then the third guy we did one for said, well, that's really cool, except for I want to be able to have my guys sitting with them in front. And so we put magnets on the aluminum bar at the top, and then that holds the gun standing up, so while everybody's there. And everybody has their own little their own little methods, and we try and pick up a little bit from everybody.
Some guys,
a lot of good ideas,
like running the long lines out of leaf bags. Some guys like running them out of slotted bags. Some guys like unclipping each decoy. Some guys run them on the shelves. It all ends up being something that you tweak to work best for your style of hunting. You've seen it all a million different ways, all on the same lake. It's all personal preference.
We have one customer who had three. He started with a 14 Classic, and he had heaters and a pull-out stovetop. And so then we built him a 14 C-Class. He was actually the first one we did, and he put in 3 heaters and propane heaters and a cooktop that comes out. So when he's out there, he cooks on his stove in his 14. So
that's doing it right there.
That is doing it right.
Cozy.
So, I just had a question. We spend time in the off season shooting and training our dogs and, getting ready for season. How many people actually go out and set decoys in different types of weather, just to do that? Or
I bet not.
You know what I mean?
It
sounds funny. It sounds bad. But even getting out and, like you said, if you're in 30 foot of water, how many people are actually putting, 200 feet of
No.
line out.
Yeah.
Right.
No, nobody's doing that. That turns into such a pile of line that you got to keep your hands on it. But it's amazing how if you're dragging anchor and in 30 feet of water or something, winds blowing, currents ripping, and you just can't hold bottom. It's amazing how much of a difference it makes to let out another 30 feet of line. Another 50
Well,
feet of line, you do that, and all of a sudden you can hang on like you read about.
It's
yeah,
just so
and
much nicer to do stuff when you're not freezing cold, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Like,
A
well, I
lot
can
of guys
I can tell you.
in the summer use them as beach boats. It especially in the coastal regions, it's really common.
People do, new guys do spend some time going out and learning their boat in the daytime and putting some time on it and practicing with their dog to get them used to it, and learning their places and setting their waypoints on their GPS or doing whatever. So it's, I think a number of them take it pretty seriously and are pretty wise about it, so then when they're going at 4:30 in the morning and they can't see a darn thing, they've they know where they're going.
Well, I can tell you too. It's if you're not real confident in your ability to, set an anchor and hold bottom and position yourself, you're gonna have a really tough time hunting over, decoys because, like where I was, if you're hunting with tide and any kind of wind and stuff, if you're not locked in good, I mean, you'll be all over, and it's just gonna frustrate you. That's all it does to me. Is I just get irritated because, it may be a slow morning, but you can guarantee if you drift a little bit out of position, that's when the birds are going to come in and you're not going to be able to get good shooting on them because you've drifted or whatever. So, if guys aren't practicing, they definitely should be, or they will after they.
well, that's kind of why I brought it up. For someone that's listening and say, yeah, I do want to get into this and, take that time in the summer and go set up. And if your stuff starts floating away, then it's a learning experience rather than getting super mad and, ruining a day hunting. So,
Yeah.
I would be one out trying to figure that out before.
It's definitely not something that people that have owned these boats for years or have been doing big water hunting for years, you're not going to see people like doing it to spruce up in the off season, but
Yeah.
it's definitely a great idea for people that are trying to get into it. Taking some nice sunny September day and going and figuring it all out instead of at 0 dark 30 and weather.
Sounds like a nice little date night for you and the missus, Dan. You guys can go out and throw some decoys around, set an anchor or two, see what happens. Good times.
Few limeritas, whatever.
Yeah, see what happens. I got a question, and this is probably the last one I'll ask you, and then I'll let Dan cover whatever he's got left. But I think one of the things that when you're talking about hunting in general, but particularly big water in certain situations like that is, obviously safety has to be paramount. And every single year you see stories of guys, losing their life duck hunting for whatever reason. And, when we talked on the phone, I mentioned to you, there's definitely been days where I'm standing at the boat ramp and I'm like, is this one of those days that I should probably just go home? But, I get to hunt once or twice a week. I hate to miss those days when I get opportunities, but so it's hard to walk away and say, today's just not the day. Like I'm going to walk away. So for you guys, you spend a lot of time around water, know what these boats are capable of, these kind of things. When you are at the ramp and you see this, or when you look at the weather and you see that, what are the things that guys that don't have all that experience to draw on, when they see these things, what are those items that should throw red flags for people? Obviously, if you see like incredibly high winds or whatever, that's one thing. But like, I think it's the gray area, right? Like, and I know it's situational dependent. Everybody's area is a little bit different, but in general, and it's fine if you guys speak to what you guys have and what locally to your area. But I think that's really kind of to the point of my question is helping guys understand where's that line, because it's really thin, and you can one day go out in similar conditions and be fine, and the next day you're out there in similar conditions and you're in trouble. So for you guys, sort of where does that line live?
Well, the line is definitely very gray and very there's no doubt about it. For us up here in particular, the wind direction, a difference of 5 degrees can make a huge change. You know, it can be the difference between 6-inch chop or 3-foot chop. So I think, you know, understanding your specific area, understanding the forecast that you're looking at, how that compares to what's currently going on, what that forecast is going to be doing, and how that might shift and change your current conditions that you're seeing. You know, the worst thing that you can do is be in that gray area of, I might be good, I might not, let's see what happens. We go out, things kick up, and all of a sudden you're in a really bad situation. And then you're just, you know, it can get really ugly really quick. And you got to know what your boat's capable of, what you're capable of, and what the seas there are capable of. You know, what that lake can do, what that river can do, what that bay can do with certain tidal conditions, certain wind conditions. It's tough to say, you need to look out for this or you need to look out for that. It's so experience based for those specific areas.
I think what Nate does is looks at sail flow and there's different weather, you know, good wind sites, fish weather. There's a couple of them that really have good
Wind forecast,
really good wind forecasts, and pick a place that's going to work for that in advance. You know, trust it, find one you trust, and then don't go to a place where, you know, just find another place to go.
Yeah.
You know, there's some place where coming from that direction, you know, from the northwest, I can hunt here and here and here. And from the east, I got to hunt over here and here and here. And, you know, sort of finding a service that you trust, and checks out pretty well over time. And then, you know, going to a spot, not being too hard-headed about, well, I saw the birds here today. It's like, well, yeah, but you can't go when it's out of the north over here because you'll swamp and die. So we'll go somewhere on the south side of the Cape, and we'll figure something else out to do.
Being able to be real with yourself is super important, you know.
Yeah. I've not hunted a lot of tidal water, but where I live here, we've got tidal water. And I know that when the wind's blowing on a certain direction on a falling tide, you do not want to be out there. I mean, you're just
That's the other thing.
asking for trouble.
When is your tide change? You know, oh, everything's awesome. And then all of a sudden the tide changes, you're out of whack with all your decoys. And all of a sudden there's a big chop coming, you know, that wasn't there before, because now the wind is against the tide, and your whole spread is all screwed up, and you got to move everything. And now it's in a 2-foot chop instead of a, you know, 6-inch chop, and just got to think ahead. You know?
Well, I think Nate, you nailed it by saying it's not as much about what your boat can do; it's what that body of water that you're on can do. You know, like Dan talks about that lake local to where we grew up, and it's shallow all the way across, man-made shallow lake, and it's, you know, the wind picks up a little bit, it's going to get gnarly because of that. So I think that really is the key thing. And you know, guys will say that all the time. I got this boat, man. I got this, you know, C-class rig. We'll roll through everything. And that's really not what it's about. It's, you know, that boat can do a lot, but that water and that situation, when all the totality of all the elements come into it, can do a lot worse.
Personal testimonials are a dangerous thing too. I've seen it so many places on forums and social media and everything, where guys will hop on there just to, you know, flex their muscles about their specific boat, whatever that manufacturer is.
There's tough guys on the internet.
Cowboys out there, huh?
I can't tell you how many times, oh, well, I've had my XYZ boat out in 5-footers. It's like, no, you haven't. I wouldn't want to take a 40-foot lobster boat out in 5-footers. You know, being real with what you read is one thing, but then the guys that don't know enough yet to be real with it, it gets tough because they read, oh, I can go out in 5-footers in my 17-foot XYZ. And next thing you know, they're at the ramp and there's 3-footers crashing on the shore, and they're going, oh, well, so-and-so on Facebook said that I got another 2 feet to work with, so I'm good. Yeah. And it's just,
yep. My 3-foot chop and your 3-foot chop are often different too.
Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true.
Being aware of your body of water, being aware of your boat, and having, like he was saying, having a good forecasting service is really, really important.
I was going to say, just for our listeners, if a lot of this sounds confusing to you, you're not alone, because I would feel the same if I was going into a bigger body of water. So this is why we do say, sometimes it is good to go with a guide, and they know all of this stuff and they know what they can handle and what their equipment can handle. So if you think you're just going to take a boat out and like you said, a 5-degree change in the wind, can swamp you. So, go and learn and ask questions when you do. And, it's better to be safe than sorry.
Find a friend of a friend. There's so many people that are willing to take friends out hunting, and especially on new experiences with all these new Facebook groups and forums and everything. There's so many places where you can get in touch with people from different walks of life, per se, in terms of hunting, that are always happy to take people out. And they're people that have been doing it for years, and they can show you a thing or two before you take your 14-foot John boat out. And there's certain days where a 14-foot John boat is more than enough to get out and chase some divers or some sea ducks. But then there's days where it's not even close,
Yeah. And I mean, I experienced that going up to Maine, and, we hunted eiders up there, and, we went out with the guys from Old Town Canoe, and we went out to an outcrop, shot a couple eiders, and they said, "Hey, we got to get out of here by 10 o'clock." And I said, "Why?" And they said, "Because these outcrops are going to be underwater." And I was like, "That's like 18, 20 foot." And they're like, "Yeah, it'll be underwater." And so we got out of there, went down the road, came back, and there was like a foot of water. We drove around a little bit more, came back, or a foot above water. And I mean, it was gone. I was like, "You got to be kidding me." Like, I would not think that, right? I just never experienced it and wouldn't even.
Local knowledge for a funny thing about that, like here on Cape Cod, which is something I still don't understand, a peninsula sticking out on the north side, we have typically to a 9 to a 12-foot tide. Our average is by 9.5-foot tide. Well, right on the south side, which is connected by the Atlantic Ocean around to the east and the Cape Cod Canal, it's only like a 3-foot tide.
Yeah.
I don't get it, but that's what it is. You didn't know it, you wouldn't know it,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But just to go back on the safety stuff real quick, the other really important facet of all that is having the right safety equipment on the boat for the unfortunate situation that we all hope never happens. But if it does happen, you always want to be prepared. And this touches back on the maintenance, making sure that all your electronics work, specifically your bilge pump. And if you have
a good bucket,
space, good bucket,
best bilge pump.
If you have the space and the capacity for it, a second bilge pump. Redundancy is a great thing. But then buckets, like he said, your signaling horn, your flares, your life jackets, obviously. It's making sure that you are all good to go with all the most important part. Your shotgun shells aren't nearly as important as those flares, and a lot of that safety equipment is stuff that people check right at the beginning of the season and then don't check again until the next season.
Well, and a couple of awesome things that are available now are those inflatable life jackets that you can put on, you don't know you have, that have the CO2 thing, and a cell phone there. Everybody's cell phone, which is nice sometimes.
Yeah, waterproof case for a cell phone. And that way, if God forbid you do go in the drink, it's more useful than a VHF radio, and you can call any and everybody.
Right. Straight to 911.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So I have one last question. It's, what kind of suits your fancy on the duck hunting up there? What's your go-to? If you can hunt anything this coming weekend, like, what are you going after?
Eiders. For me.
Didn't even hesitate, Dan.
Nope. No hesitation whatsoever. Eiders.
For him, he'd probably say pheasants out of a lodge in South Dakota.
I'm a little soft.
That works too. There's nothing wrong with that.
Do you guys still have a little bit of season left up there, or are you about done?
We closed out Monday. We had 1 day left of Vets Day, military active and past duty on Saturday, but the weather's just going to be nasty, and it
Yeah.
15 degrees and blowing 20, and I don't think many people are going to be out on that.
Yeah.
But,
How was the flight up your way this year and
Good.
comparative to other years?
It was good. Last year was pretty slow for us down on Cape. This year was good.
2 years ago was really good. Last year was
Yeah.
bad compared to 2 years ago.
2 years ago was spectacular. Last year was
Bad.
rough, and this year was getting back to normal. We had a big flight of white wings around, which was really cool. And I know that guys were picking away at puddle ducks around here really late. I saw a picture from a friend of a friend that shot a green wing teal here on Cape last week. So strange.
Those things are confusing. They stick around in wintertime.
And you're down by DC, and
yeah, and
So-
Josh is by DC, and I'm south of Lake Erie on the PA Ohio border, like 45 minutes from the lake. So
okay. And how was your guys' season?
Yeah, not. I
not
mean,
too-
we get
not
geese
too hot.
here. Yeah, we get geese. If you want to hunt geese, you can do that. Puddle ducks are tough. They're here in spots, but where I live, that access is tough. So unless you have access to those spots, you're probably not shooting many puddlers, or not a ton. But you only shoot 2 mallards and stuff. So
Yeah.
we typically, if you want to shoot a bunch of buffalo heads, you can come here and do that.
I was going to say it's early on. We have some decent puddle ducks. You'll get a couple pushes here and there, but I mean, our merganser population is just incredible.
Thriving.
It's intense lately. But we have, our late goose season is coming back in here pretty soon, and hopefully we can get after them a bit more. So I'm excited about that.
So do you guys do much diver hunting where you're at? Because both of you are in relative close proximities to some great diver hunting.
Yeah, I mean, for the most part, the diver hunting when the weather's right around here can be really good. We'll get canvasbacks, redheads, bluebills. We'll shoot quality diver ducks, but it just takes the right weather, right? And a lot of times it just doesn't really get good until January mid-month, and you only get 2 weeks to really bang on them. But some years are better than others, but I mean, where we're hunting on the Potomac, right outside of DC here, if it gets cold enough to where the birds are actually pushed down, oftentimes we're dealing with ice, and we're trying to battle that too, which is what I was saying, kind of tears up your stuff. But there's no doubt great diver hunting here. I mean, I shot my first ever canvasback. You can kind of see it on my shelf behind me there for you guys. I shot that thing in November here in Virginia a couple years ago. So it can be great for sure. But then,
and Erie was slow this year for all the guys that hunt that a ton. Like it wasn't what it usually is. So Erie was slow, and then Connie, like we have 2 local lakes here. One is super deep, and you'll get it stays open. You get a good push of divers a couple times a year. And there was one day when I seen a ton of divers. Next day they were gone, and that was it. That's all I saw like during season. So, and then we're locked up. So like, this is great. But yeah, it was a good year to go to
Under 100
West.
of lake effect snow.
Yeah,
we do get some snow. There's no doubt
doubt
about that.
We're actually supposed to get some snow coming up here in Virginia over the weekend. So that'll be, I think, the second time we've seen snow this year, maybe. So not often, but all right, Dan, you got anything else you want to ask of the boys here before we let them go?
Not of these guys. I do want to mention, I'm just really sad lately about what happened down at Reelfoot, and I probably should have started the episode off with that.
Yeah.
But it seems like there might have been some mental instability going on there. But just I feel really bad for the two gents and their families. So prayers to them, and it's just really sad to see anything like that happen. So it doesn't even, I mean, from more of what I'm reading, it doesn't even seem like it was a dispute. It seems like he got into the blind to asked if he could hunt with him. That's what I just read on Meat Eater before we came on here. He said, "Can I hunt with you guys?" And he pulled the trigger on two of them, and the third one knocked him into the water and took his buddies back to shore. So I mean, it's just super sad, and I can't really say much more about it. So just be careful out there.
Be down there.
It's crazy.
Crazy stories, and it's crazy too. That what you just described is not the story that was circulating on social media for the first couple of days. It was all about shooting another swing of birds and stuff or whatever. So you never really know what the full deal is with that. But anytime you get loss of life in the field, it's pretty tragic. Whether it's that or guys capsizing their boat or whatever. There's certainly stuff that we want to avoid. So definitely a sad day in the duck hunting community for that kind of stuff. But all right, guys. Well, I wanted
not to end it on a sad note.
I was going to say.
So
now
I apologize.
That
was a great conversation, and I really
Dan.
appreciate you guys coming on. And but yeah,
Danny
sorry.
Downer over there. Well, anyway, Nate, Tom, thank you guys for coming on, making some time for us. I understand, Tom, we made you stay up past your bedtime tonight, so we're going to let you go.
Like 2 hours, probably.
I'll sleep in tomorrow. You've earned it.
Oh, yeah.
But I did want to say, too, if listening to us talk about your boats and stuff got people interested in kind of what we're referring to and things, they can head over and check you guys out at TDBCO, the duckboatcompany.com. You can see all the boats we've been talking about and all the stuff that they got going on over there. So thanks again, guys. Hope you guys have a great build season this year. And thanks again for your time. We'll catch up with you later.
Thanks for having us on.
Good to meet you.
That's going to do it for this episode of the HP Outdoors Waterfowl Podcast. If you're new to the show, head over to iTunes, check out some of our past episodes, and while you're there, leave us a 5-star rating and review. It's the best way for like-minded hunters just like you to find our show. Check us out on social media, check us out over at hpoutdoors.com, and anywhere you can find quality podcast content. That's going to do it for this week. Till next time, for Dan, I'm Josh. Take care.